You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in. Okay, listeners, welcome back. Today, I am thrilled to have a guest on who actually is living right in my neighborhood in Sweden these days. I want to introduce you to the founder and senior marketing consultant, Nils Nordström, over at Flax Digital. So, Nils, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, Pat.
My pleasure.
I'm sitting in the office space where we first met, in the office space that we share, Helio, here in Stockholm.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I'll let you give the intro about yourself in a minute here. But you're obviously a wide-ranging digital marketing consultant. You have experience in a lot of different realms. Today, we're going to focus really on like Facebook/Meta ads. But selfishly, I do want to see if I can have you back on later to speak to LinkedIn ads in particular, just because it's an area that you've actually helped our business personally with to such a large degree. But maybe for that one, we can even do the recording in the podcast studio. We can test that one out instead of me being remote.
Yeah. Let's aim for it.
But yeah, jumping in, you would love to have you just give an overview to the audience. Tell us a little about yourself and how did you get started with Flax Digital?
Yeah, cool. So we started 4.5 years ago. Basically, it's a company that I started together with my girlfriend, and basically we lived in Australia for 2 years together. Worked at different startups. And basically as in-house marketing, performance marketing specialists. And I also ventured into sort of a more general marketing manager role there in Australia. But coming back from Australia, we felt that we wanted to, instead of going into an employment, we wanted to keep, see if we could continue working what we did in Australia, but rather on sort of a consultancy side and have our own business rather than going into an employment, and also maintaining the possibility to not be bound to a specific spot, be able to travel and work a bit remote. So that was the sort of the goal with the company as we started it, and we've been helping a lot of different companies throughout these 4.5 years. It's been B2B companies, D2C companies, e-commerce businesses. And yeah, it's a really thrilling space to be in because it's applicable to a lot of different areas and still feels highly relevant to this day. Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the big things I wanted to speak to is, picturing that smaller business e-commerce setup, whether it's a solo founder or, a founder that has maybe a team of 3 to 5 people working with them, helping them to better assess Facebook/Meta ads and doing some things that'll help them to be more profitable with that investment that they're either already making or looking to make in the future. So with that, I'd love to hear from you. Let's say I'm running a e-commerce business right now. Why should I be investing in Facebook ads?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And obviously, like Facebook, I mean, if we just look at the traffic acquisition landscape today, there's basically like, when it comes to an e-commerce brand, you're talking to consumers. There's still like the 2 major players, which is Google and Meta ads. It's where you find majority of your digital users. I mean, Meta still has 3.85 billion users worldwide. Only in Sweden, 85% of the population above 8 years old is on Facebook. 65% is on Instagram. So there's a lot of people to be reached there. And there's a lot of new platforms coming up as well. TikTok, you have Be Real, you have Snapchat. On the business-to-business side, you have LinkedIn, as you mentioned. But so really, it's like, I would sort of revert the question: what's the risk of not being on Facebook, on Instagram, if you're an e-commerce brand today? Yeah, it's really one of the platforms you'd prioritize if you're looking to build a brand and fill up your sort of top funnel new customers, really. And it works as a great support in that specific, stage of your customer journey.
So one of the things that I wanted to really dive into today, I want to put you on the spot and give you a more tangible example that we can look at. I'm, let's say, running a smaller e-commerce business. Let's say I have the example of a pillow company on my mind right now. Clearly, I need to get a better night's sleep if that's the first thing on my mind. But let's say I'm running a pillow company right now. I'm doing, maybe 250 to 500,000 US in annual revenue. Solo founder, maybe one or two employees at my side, but I'm really looking to get started with Facebook ads. Plan initially is I'll plan on running it on my own, and figure out the approach from there. But what advice would you give for me if I'm looking to just get started with Facebook ads today?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're just getting started, it's really important to get the foundations right. And with the foundations, I mean obviously getting the tracking correctly set up. If you're sort of a small e-commerce business, maybe you're using a platform like Shopify. So there's a lot of direct integration possibilities between your business manager account and your Shopify account. So you can set up catalog feeds just by a couple of clicks, basically using the API, and you can set up also the necessary events that you need to be tracking in Meta to run a successful campaign. And those are the standard ones that you want to be looking at is basically obviously page views to be able to track anyone who lands on your page, but then maybe view content, somebody clicks through to view one of your products, and then obviously someone who adds to cart, and then after adding to cart they might initiate the checkout process, and obviously the most important one is the purchase event. And once you have that set up, you might want to allocate some budget to start driving some traffic and testing out to see what you might be able to expect from the platform. And if you dive into the sort of the Facebook Ads Manager in basically the platform or the back end of it, you're going to be faced with like three columns. You have the campaign section, and then the ad set section, and then the ads section. And basically, I'll just talk a little bit quickly through each different steps because it also has evolved a lot throughout the years. But basically, in the campaign section, you choose whether you want to focus on brand awareness, you want to get engagement, you want to do conversions or sales, you might want to do leads. I would say in an early stage, your main priority would be to drive some initial, as high intent traffic as you can. I would highly recommend that even though you're new, you should try to focus on a conversion based campaign. So in that section, I would keep my focus on conversions. It might be difficult for you to initially optimize for the purchase event because the way it works is there's a learning phase to all the campaigns, and they're looking to get within 7 days. If you come up to 50 conversions for the event that you're optimizing for, you've exited your learning phase. And your goal should be to be able to exit your learning phase as quickly as possible to reduce cost and improve targeting, basically. So if you're new and if your budgets are low, I might want to start with optimizing for a higher funnel event. That might be view content, or that might be add to cart. Purchase might be a bit sort of far off in the beginning. But then sort of when we left the campaign phase, basically, you're in the ad set phase where you build your audience. And I would say, I mean, a lot has happened in this section since within the last sort of 4 years. You had the iOS update 2021, or year 2021, the 14.5 iOS update that basically made it possible for people to check out from tracking. So Meta lost a lot of data on their users. And since then, but also even before, audiences, they tend to prefer to use a broad audience and let the algorithm sort of do the main work. So less of the work has gone from sort of your ad set optimization and more has moved into your ad optimization, the content, basically. But with that said, let's say that if you're selling pillows, your audience is broad. I mean, you're going to be targeting, unless it's a super expensive pillow that's going to make you go from sleeping 6-hour pad to like 15 hours, and it's very highly expensive, that you might want to target a bit higher sort of age brackets. But other than that, I would keep it fairly broad. I would do 18 to 65 plus. I would there's basically a new feature that Meta just launched like 2 weeks ago, is that they have the audience suggestion combined with a sort of automated audience targeting, basically. So what you might do is that you might fill in some sort of initial interests, um, and Meta will use those at first, but then initially will basically use sort of the algorithm to expand and try to find who's ever relevant. And it's expanding based off of your conversion event. So it's going to be optimizing for people that are highly likely to view either content or add to cart or make a purchase. So obviously, the further down you can optimize in the funnel, the higher quality for the targeting. So I would recommend starting broad. I would actually recommend doing one basically in that early stage. If you have a low budget, you can use what's called basically an ASC campaign, basically an automated shopping campaign, because it mixes your retargeting and your prospecting into one. Otherwise, if you got more budget to spend and you want to have higher sort of transparency and insight into how much you're spending on new customers versus your old customers or existing customers or previous website visitors, you might want to split the two audiences. But early on, we might combine the two in an automated shopping campaign. And so once we finish the ads section, basically we go into the ads section, and this is where I would say these days like 85% of the optimization is in this part for Meta. The content, the actual ad is going to be what's going to optimize your campaign, make sure that you reach the right people. So, and here there's obviously no set rule for which ad is going to, provide you with the best results. So there's obviously a lot of guidelines and there's a lot of examples to go off of, but it's important to keep, a creative mindset and not get stuck in too much competitor analysis. Just trying to, do a lot of testing and see what works really. So if you get a low budget, I would recommend that you start off initially with having maybe 3 to 5 ads. You might want to have some variety in them. You might want to do one that's just a static image with some unique selling points. You got to remember these are new clients. They don't know of your brand yet. They don't know of your product yet. But we're still looking to get them to the page and maybe want to even add to cart. So it's gonna be important that we push hard on our unique selling points, and then also make sure that it's an image that clearly sort of defines the product or what you're looking to get. If you sort of click through to this link, you got to be clear that it's a pillow company. But that's I would recommend to do either 1 or 2 versions of videos. You can try to do something, either in a studio or a bit higher quality. I mean, that might be a bit expensive, but you don't have to get stuck in thinking that it needs to be sort of the absolute best quality. Sometimes it's sufficient with it, using your iPhone and testing different sort of creative ways of displaying how this pillow is better than any other pillow. But then another way of getting video materials is using your network, maybe using some of your clients to provide you with a video. It's called UGC, sort of user generated content, which has been taking up a larger part of ads these days, especially driven by the big trend with TikTok. So I would see if I can get one UGC ad into your prospecting mix. And then there's options to do like carousel ads, basically if you have multiple products, you can display them in a carousel. They haven't performed really well sort of the last 3 days, but in the last year, I've actually seen some clients having some success with it. So if you're selling more versions of pillows or just like more products, that might be one way to display it. And then obviously you have instant experiences where you build a shop within the Facebook and Instagram app. It can be good if you want to sort of introduce your brand and the different products that you're selling. You just got to be wary of Meta is probably going to prioritize that ad above others because it keeps users active in the Facebook or Instagram app for a longer time. So that might be, getting disproportional amount of spend, but might not be the one sort of converting best into sales. So yeah, and then basically, try to set up a rule for yourself and a process to have at least one. I mean, ideally, you'd have 3 to 5 new creatives every second or third week. That might be difficult in the early stage where you're low on capacity, you're limited on time. So what you might want to do then is just like set a rule for yourself that, okay, at least once a week we'll come up with one new ad, and try to sort of. But then again, like if your campaign is performing well from the different KPIs that you want to be measuring, and we can talk a bit about those KPIs later, but you shouldn't sort of switch off or change just for the cost of changing the ad, because like they tend to perform better over time. So be patient, and if it's performing, just leave it be. But you can still add new ads if you'd wish, because they might improve performance. But if you have one that's performing really well, you can just basically leave it there. Yeah, sorry, that's a lot of information in short time, but I have a difficult, just not doing the full thing once I get started. So yeah, ask questions or let's break it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was going to say that was phenomenal. So I'm way oversimplifying a lot of knowledge bombs that you dropped in there, and I hope listeners rewind that 10 minutes and just listen to that again, because there was so much gold that you just packed into like the past 10 minutes. Let's try and unpack that a little bit. So I'm oversimplifying some of the big takeaways I had from that, and then I'll share some follow-up questions within that. But one of the first, I guess I would say, takeaways that I had from that is my oversimplistic understanding is, hey, when you're running meta ads, expect that for those first 50 conversion events that you're probably not going to see the best ROI relative to what you might be seeing a few months down the road, but expect to do quite a bit of experimentation, give Meta time to collect data and start to auto optimize for you as you go along, and really use that first, whether it's a 30-day window or a 60-day window, to collect as much data you can about different ad sets. Oversimplified, but is that a fair summary of that?
Yeah, no, that's a really important point that, initially you're not going to see, these days, very few companies see a positive ROAS within the first sort of couple of months. I would say, like, if you're going to start with this, have a time period of 3 months where you basically test your campaign structure, your product fit and the different ads and your audiences. But sort of have in mind that leave some space for having a bit of a negative ROI for a period at least.
I think one of the follow-up concerns that would come to mind for me running this pillow company, probably working a lot of hours, making the time to set up Facebook ads, Meta ads, is certainly something I want to prioritize, but something I also need to be mindful of. How many hours am I putting into it per week? So for this founder who is really strapped for time, if you had to narrow the focus to maybe 1 or 2 different types of ad creatives to start out to really get their campaign off the ground for testing, what would you recommend there? What do you typically see works best?
Yeah, so I would say that obviously the easiest one to start with is just a static image of your product. Maybe add some copy to that image, basically displaying the uniqueness and your key selling points. If you can do like 2 versions of that, it doesn't have to be a huge difference between the 2, but maybe you want to test out like what types of unique selling points works better. That's an easy way to start. And then I've seen a lot of early days for companies where there's like a sole founder or 1 or 2 founders. I've seen examples where the founder story, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a video format, but just having the founder talking about, or just the founder being on an image combined with the product, and maybe some personal text about like, how did you come to create this product and why? I think the formulating the issue that you're trying to address and solve with your product, and doing that with, actually being the one representing the product in the ad. That has been very successful. The typical name for it is the founder story, and usually it's also a great way to do a video format ad. But initially, you could try to do it as a static image. So basically, two versions of your product with some unique selling points, and maybe one image where yourself is there, and you might be holding a pillow, you might be throwing a pillow. I don't know. It depends on what sort of angle you want to take with your brand. But my recommendation is be creative. I mean, early days, you might I meet a lot of founders and a lot of CMOs these days that are still very sensitive to, like, what damage could this do to my brand if I send out an ad that's not aligned with our brand guidelines. And I think a lot of people tend to sort of overstress the effect of that ad, like the bad impact, basically, because the upside of doing something new creatively is that you might end up selling at 12 times your input. So yeah, I think, like, really adapting your creative mindset is really important those early days. But statics works really well, and I think, like, having 3 versions of statics can be a good start.
Absolutely. And I love that because, especially in those early days, one of those competitive advantages can be that oftentimes that willingness to like push the envelope a little bit, because you get a more
Mm.
established business that, is doing, tens of millions, hundreds of millions in annual revenue. At that point, they're going to have their legal department that's probably reviewing a lot of those ads, making sure that they're not saying anything too risque. So in those early stages, yeah, if you can push the envelope a little bit, it gives you a really great chance to stand out and have some of those 10x performing ads.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, with the whole UGC trend that you're seeing in these platforms today, there's I mean, it's obviously good for those people starting off early, because it's not necessarily a competitive advantage to do a full studio, 100K budget video. It's not necessarily that video that will perform. So I mean, Meta is great for that stage company, because it's it gives a lot of opportunities without necessarily having to spend a lot of money. But again, you gotta understand that the first couple of months you're gonna have to see it as an investment, and you gotta have to sort of be willing to test things, and not sort of stop just like the second week because you're not seeing the results that you were expected. So have some leverage for a bit of a trial period.
Absolutely. And now, when it comes to investing in meta ads, how do you typically think about recommending that businesses either have the founder manage those ads in house, hiring a contractor to manage it for them, hiring that agency, or actually hiring a full-time employee for it? Are there certain, budget thresholds or certain trends that you see that lead you to indicate one or the other for certain businesses?
So I think it depends a lot on you as a founder. Like, if you're strong within the product field or product development area, or are you like really good with design, or are you generally like a really good data analyst? I think it depends on, like, yeah, depending on your profile, where you should put your focus. But obviously, in those early days, you gotta do a little bit of everything. You gotta wear a lot of hats. So I would say, like, initially, I think you can do a lot by just looking at YouTube videos, reading on blogs, uh, to get your sort of first setup in your Meta account, especially if you're starting with a smaller budget. You can do a lot by yourself if you are willing to take the time. But also getting some, I think one way when I get sort of some sort of request from very early stage companies that have little budget and might not be able to pay, like, for me to spend a full month working with them, I might offer, like, okay, I'll give you 2 hours of advisement. I might do a bit of an audit on your business, and I might give you some recommendations. And I would think that's a really, I think that's a really good way to start. You might invest in, like, buying 2 hours of a senior consultant just to get that first sort of it's the strategy right, because it can be expensive if you start off on the wrong foot and you keep doing that for a longer period of time. So yeah, I would say like try to do as much as you can on your own, and just find research online. There's a lot of stuff that can help you online, and just go to YouTube. But if you feel like it's tight on time and you're, I would say if you're going to start do it properly. Like for at least like 3 months, you should be able to, go in and check the account every second day, and at least have prepared to launch new ads every like second or third week, and be willing to make that investment for a minimum of 3 months, I would say.
Absolutely. In building upon that, certainly one of the big costs that'll come into play, if you do hand off meta ads management to a third party, is you're going to take on some level of management fees. A lot of different pricing models that come into play. Some individuals or some companies will charge hourly for that. Some will charge a percentage of monthly ad spend. Let's say I'm that founder, though, maybe the business is continuing to grow. Meta ads aren't something that I'm really passionate about. It's not a space that I like truly understand. At what point in terms of, maybe monthly ad spend, would you say that it's a viable investment for me to start handing that off to an expert?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's obviously, it varies a bit. Like if you might be starting with a smaller budget, but you have really aggressive growth goals, so you might, or growth targets, you might start off with a smaller budget the first month, but then and you may take the investment with a consultant. But as sort of, budget will hopefully scale over time, because ideally what would happen when you get a consultant is your performance is going to get better, because they have a lot of experience and know how to sort of steer the campaigns in the right direction. So ideally you'd scale that account and the budget with it. I would say if you're spending less than I would say $1,000 a month, paying 10 to 30% of that to a consultant might be a bit large portion of your total budget. Although at that level, it might definitely be worthwhile to spend, just like $200 to get a 1 hour sort of strategy and maybe audit from a senior consultant. But a full-on management fee for a sort of on a monthly basis, I would say that might start in somewhere in between spending $2,000 to $5,000 a month.
Shifting in a different direction, let's stick with the pillow company example. I'm selling high-end pillows, but let's assume that maybe the business is doing 2 million in annual revenue. At this point, we've been running meta ads for the past 12 months. We're fairly profitable on it, but we really want to figure out, hey, how do we get 10 to 30% better performance out of it? What are some of the most common things that you'll see when you go in and you audit those existing meta ads accounts?
One thing that is really important, even at a higher level, is not splitting up your budget too much between campaigns, ad set, and ads. So even if you're spending, let's say, like $100,000 a month, there's still a lot to win by consolidating your budgets and making sure that you have a clean structure. So you might want to run, for instance, an automatic shopping campaign, where you can steer the split between your existing customers and your new customers. So you might want to do like a 25% split on the people that have bought previously and visited your page within the last sort of 180 days. And then the rest, like let's say 80 to 75% will be spent on your new clients. And also make sure that you're, evaluating the right KPIs. So obviously, like if growth is the goal, and if it's profitable growth, the KPI that you want to be looking at is, your cost per purchase. If we talk about the Meta platform now, I would say like make sure that you have your columns right in your report section. Look at your clicks, your click-through rate. You might want to use your CPM costs, although the correlation between CPM costs and your actual ROAS on a specific ad is not necessarily, they're not 100% correlated. So I would say the most important ones are probably your cost per purchase, cost per add to cart, and the ROAS on your each campaign and each ad. And then, but obviously, like there's a lot of it's a bit of a black box. Even though we talk a lot about data driven marketing and tracking and all that, there's a lot of discrepancies between the systems. So you always gotta optimize your campaigns and your sales funnel based off of your P&L. You gotta look at what the actual numbers are and do that on a sort of not just on a monthly basis, but on a daily basis.
Talk to me a little about the tools you'd recommend for someone who's looking to self-manage. What might be easier to do, you let me know if it's more straightforward this way, is perhaps we break it into, let's assume we have that solo business owner. They're spending 2,000 US a month on Facebook ads. What are some of the tools you would recommend for them? And then similarly, does that tool set shift in your experience once you get to that point where maybe you have a dedicated person on the team, or maybe you're even spending 10 hours a week and part of your job is managing a 50 to 100K US dollar per month ad spend with Meta ads?
Yeah. So I mean, I would say, like, in that early stage, you're pretty fine. You're pretty well off with using the Facebook, the ads manager section and the business manager section. You might be on Shopify where you have your dashboard where you can follow up on actual sales. You're gonna have to set up your Google Analytics account, your GA4 account, and obviously keep track of that on a daily basis as well. And you might want to do one dashboard where you look at your actual sales numbers and where you've sort of gone through them and made sure that they're correct. And you might want to connect like a Google Sheet to a Looker Studio dashboard, for instance, and make sure that you're sort of, one way to attribute the two. Or if it's difficult to attribute, at least like, okay, I've increased my budget in Meta. It says that I'm getting, 2 times the money that I spend. I can see that I get a lot of clicks to the website, but see how that reflects on your actual P&L on a, weekly, daily basis.
I love it. Nils, this has been so insightful. Thank you for sharing all this today. Last question I have for you is, how can people both A, best get in touch with you, and B, learn about other resources that you're putting out down the road?
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty easy to just follow me on LinkedIn or connect on LinkedIn. My name is Nils Nordström. You could probably provide a link maybe, or just send me an email at nils@flaxdigital.se.
I love it. And we'll add some of those links to the show notes as well. Nils, thank you for coming on. This was incredible today.
Thank you, Pat. Pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.